If you've been anywhere near Nintendo forums or comment sections lately, you've probably seen Welcome Tour popping up, often alongside some pretty passionate opinions. Is it a proper game, a glorified instruction manual, or just another oddball Nintendo side project? Well, before we get into the details, I wanted to share that I was offered a review code for Welcome Tour, but I chose not to accept it, as this release has already seen plenty of skepticism swirling about. This review isn't here to tear the game down, nor defend it blindly. The goal is simple: to figure out what Welcome Tour actually is, who it's for, and whether it really earns the price on the box. What's it like? Set up your console, throw out your instruction manual, and prepare for exams as we review Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour. At its core, Welcome Tour is a playable user guide for your Nintendo Switch 2 hardware. Think of it as an interactive manual dressed up with bright visuals and light minigames, designed to ease users into the system's features. The game, or app I guess, depending on how you want to label it, is split into sections, and each one teaches you something about the part of the hardware you're on: controllers, screens, the interior of the Joy-Cons, and so on. But before you can move on to the next section, you need to collect stamps and complete tasks, almost like ticking off a checklist in a training course. Honestly, there were times when Welcome Tour felt less like a light-hearted introduction and more like I was paying for the privilege of sitting an exam on my own console. The quizzes, with the lost and found item collecting, the stamp requirements, these pad out the experience in ways that felt more like work than play. While there are mini games scattered throughout, they don't really offer much staying power. They're small distractions that offer a momentary break from completing the checklist, but nothing you'd really go back to and boot up later for fun. If you rush through and do the bare minimum, you'll probably clear the main tour in about 5 hours, and that includes the exams, quizzes, and tracking down the lost items hidden in various areas. Oddly enough, the lost item system has a weird limit, as you can only carry one at a time. Forget to hand something in at lost property and stumble across another? Well, you'll backtrack to hand it in order to pick up the other. It's strange and feels like an old-fashioned design quirk in a product that's meant to ease you into modern hardware. Speaking of hardware, one of the more baffling choices here is that not all Welcome Tour is playable out of the box. Some minigames and demonstrations require additional hardware, like a USB camera or a 4K 120Hz television. For bundled software, that might be understandable because after all, you'd assume that not every user has every accessory. But if you're asking people to pay for the experience and then locking parts of it behind additional hardware that's outside of Nintendo's ecosystem, it feels like an odd and rather bold move on Nintendo's behalf. While there are ways to skip these sections, I found it quite odd that having a 4K 120Hz TV should be a requirement for a mostly portable system. The result is that unless you have a very specific setup at home, parts of Welcome Tour are simply unavailable. And it's not a huge chunk of content, but it feels like it's enough to make you pause and wonder, why wasn't this designed to be universally playable, or at least clearly marked as optional bonuses? And this all leads to the real problem with Welcome Tour. It feels like it doesn't quite know who it's catered for. Because on the surface, the package is aimed at beginners or a new user who's picked up the game console for the very first time. Maybe a child or a parent or a grandparent who's never really touched a Switch before, because the minigames are simple and the explanations are clear, and the whole thing is designed to ease someone into the Switch 2's features without overwhelming them. But then you hit the technical requirements. As mentioned, some minigames and demonstrations need extra hardware like a USB camera or 4K TV, things that only more serious tech-focused players are likely to have hooked up. The same crowd that buys capture cards, tweaks settings, and cares about refresh rates. People like me. So then you're left with a strange mismatch. Simple, child-friendly gameplay design layered on top of technical content that hardcore enthusiasts would care about. It's hard to imagine either group would be satisfied though. My own kids, for example, would probably play this for about 2 minutes before asking to play Mario Kart or Fortnite, which is something fun and familiar. Why bother sitting an exam for your new toy when there are actual games waiting? And then I thought maybe it could be for collectors or Nintendo oddity fans, and Honestly, I don't even think there's enough novelty here for even them, and I spent $160 on an Alarmo alarm clock. This isn't Wii Play or Nintendo Land, which both offered quirky and replayable experiences that you'd fire up every now and then for fun. This is a training tool, and once you've done the tour, there's little reason to come back. So, who is Welcome Tour for? Well, right now, it feels like the answer is almost no one. Now, let's be fair, Welcome Tour isn't going to break the bank at $15 Australian. This isn't some premium priced launch title with a major investment. But the price really isn't the issue. It's more the principle. Why is this being sold separately at all? On other platforms, onboarding tools like this are usually bundled for free. PlayStation owners got spoilt with Astro's Playroom, which was a fully fledged, charming platformer that also showcased the new hardware's features. The original Wii even came packed with Wii Sports, a simple but endlessly replayable game that introduced motion controls to the world. Welcome Tour feels like it may have been something like that for the Switch 2, maybe a quirky optional extra for curious or enthusiastic owners who wanted to explore the system's new capabilities, but instead it's been carved out as a paid standalone app, and not a very exciting one. For a system already facing plenty of online discourse about pricing, hardware choices, and software strategy, Welcome Tour really doesn't help the conversation. If anything, it pours more fuel on the fire. While the $15 price tag isn't outrageous, it raises a bigger question. Why wasn't this simply included? I can see what Nintendo is going for with Welcome Tour because it's clean and polished and it does exactly what it sets out to do by guiding new players through the ins and outs of the Switch 2. The problem is, it just wasn't for me. As someone who already knows their way around the console and who prefers to actually play games rather than pass quizzes or collect stamps, Welcome Tour more felt like sitting through a briefing on the Switch 2 rather than discovering something fun. The minigames were fine for what they were, but they won't really hold your attention for very long, and that strange mix of beginner-friendly tasks with enthusiast-level hardware requirements left the whole experience feeling oddly unfocused. That said, I can't tell you not to buy it, because if you're the kind of player who wants to deep dive into every feature that your Switch 2 has to offer, or you're setting up the system for someone brand new to gaming, maybe Welcome Tour would be worth the $15 price tag. But for most players, I suspect Mario Kart or Tears of the Kingdom will be calling long before this tour is over. So, what's it like? Welcome Tour is just like an expensive user manual. I award it a 58 out of 100. Now, what do you think? Should onboarding tools like this be free? Or is there value in having this interactive guide even as a paid extra? I want to know, respectfully. Leave your comments below. Thanks so much for watching my video. If you liked it, the best way you can support What's It Like is by liking, subscribing, and sharing it with your friends. For more reviews, click on the thumbnails to the right, and for everything Nintendo, check out what'sitlike.com.au.